G'day again from Melbourne, Australia, and welcome to this next edition of famous World War II airfields as they were during the war and as they are now in Microsoft Flight Simulator. In this video we take a look at the Nazi airfield Flugplatz Peenemunde West, now EDCP Peenemünde, and the neighbouring Nazi Army Research Centre located in northern Germany on the island of Usedom on the Baltic Sea opposite Denmark and Sweden. We also take the opportunity for a bit of fun by looking at nearby Prora, otherwise known as the Colossus of Prora, a unique Nazi holiday resort, the buildings for which still exist today. The airfield opened in 1938 as a grass field, one of 4 Nazi Air Force R&D facilities, and was used for testing experimental aircraft such as the rocket-powered Messerschmitt Me-163 and the Heinkel 111 intended for air-launching V-1 rockets, and also for the development of night navigation and radar systems. It also supplied resources for the neighbouring Army Research Centre, so a very important airfield indeed, not only for the Nazis, but also of course for the Allies to attack. The Peenemunde Army Research Centre, a very extensive facility right next to the airfield, opened in 1937. It developed the V-1 and V-2 rockets which were used towards the end of the war, and undertook R&D on a range of other rockets, including a very long-range one to reach the USA. Fortunately, Hitler earlier on was not too interested in rockets, and later on, when he became interested, it was too late. It was one of the few mistakes he admitted to. A concentration camp was built nearby to provide for 2,500 slave labourers. At its height, about 12,000 people were employed at Peenemunde on rocket development. Growing Allied intelligence, a very interesting story in its own right, led to the bombing of the site by the RAF in 1943. This was Operation Hydra, the largest British action against a single target in World War II. The Americans also bombed the site on 3 further occasions in 1944. Werner von Braun, himself a Nazi, was a technical director of the research centre and was a top scientist in the Nazi era for rocket research. He was captured by the Allies, and after the war, he, along with about 1,600 other German scientists, were secretly shipped to the USA. This was called Operation Paperclip, where they worked on military and space rockets for many years, taking the USA through the Cold War with Russia and into space and to the moon. So here we are in the beautiful little Icon A5 seaplane at EDCP Peenemunde, where new Nazi aircraft were tested and developed alongside the neighbouring Army Research Centre, where new rockets were developed. Behind the aircraft in one of those buildings is a small museum, but it's not the main museum I'll mention in a moment. After the war, Russia occupied the airfield, built the current runway, and destroyed just about everything else from the Nazi era. The power station remains, however, and is now an historical technical museum, which we'll fly over later on. Oh, looks like a Spitfire on the right. Take off to the north on runway 31. And I'll leave the flaps down at stage 1 for the flight, just to fly a little bit slower so we can see things a bit better. Coming up on the left of the aircraft in a moment, you'll see a whole lot of buildings. Unfortunately, they're autogen buildings, because in real life, if you look on Google, I think they may be former Russian jet fighter bunkers, and in Google they're covered with earth and grass on top. Turning to the east, the first item we'll be able to see is one of the remains of one of the original V1 rocket launching sites. One of the many popular tourist attractions around Peenemünde. There it is coming up in front of the aircraft now. Just a little further around the coast is the remains of a V2 rocket launching site. Not as obvious as the last site. I think it's that bright green speck just coming up in front of the nose of the aircraft now. Turning to the south, most of the Army Research Centre buildings and facilities and laboratories and launching test sites were in a straight line in front of the aircraft, following parallel to the coast. As we fly along, you'll see some of the remaining buildings now covered by forest. Looks like there's a bug with this aircraft because the nose wheel is not going up completely. Coming up in front of the aircraft now is the living quarters for the Nazi personnel. They had a beautiful beach. And over to the right in just a moment we'll see the remains of the concentration camp for the slave workers. Most of the buildings still remain, although again these are autogen buildings in the simulator. If you look on Google Earth you'll see how they looked and the state of disrepair that many of them are in now, and there it is there. Now we turn back to the north, heading to the town of Peenemünde. Town's coming up now and will appear just under the right wing of the aircraft. Just ahead of the aircraft it looks like a pier, and an old Russian submarine is located there for tourists, which is part of the museum. There it is there just in front of the aircraft now. The main technical museum, the old powerhouse, is directly ahead. It's that large building, and in the parkland around that building they have exhibits of V1 and V2 rockets and launching pads and all the rest. Can't see them in the sim, although the shadows down there look like that might be part of it. And approaching the dam, another tourist attraction is a British Lancaster that was brought down whilst attacking Peenemünde. It's mainly submerged, but in real life there's a little bit that juts out above the water and is a significant tourist attraction. I think it's a little spot just under the aircraft there. Now we turn towards the northwest and we head towards Prora, Nazi holiday resort. Prora was built from 1936 to 1939 as part of the so-called Nazi Strength Through Joy project. It consists of 8 identical long 6-storey buildings, and coming up now on the left, extending 4.5 kilometres or almost 3 miles along the coast on the island of Rügen, just north of Peenemünde. Today these remarkable buildings, a striking example of Nazi architecture, still exist and are used for a youth hostel, a hotel and vacation apartments. Again, they're autogen buildings, but it's not too far off what they really look like in Google Earth. The last of the 8 buildings coming up, why it's so far away from the others, I do not know. Turning now and flying back towards Peenemunde on the other side of those buildings. Give you a look what they look like on the back side. Quite remarkable. Just seem to go on forever. Quite surprising that they still remain, given that so much other Nazi architecture has been destroyed. And here we are, approaching Peenemünde airfield. Just turning, joining base for runway 31. Gear down, flaps down, view from the inside. Looking to turn final. I'll turn earlier than you normally would, just to avoid looking to the left all the time in the sim. Not sure what the approach speed on final is in the Icon A5, but I think about 70 will be pretty close, 70 knots. No wind, no crosswind, so no crabbing required. Can safely make the runway now, so back to idle. Starting the flare, eyes down the end of the runway, stick back, hold off, stick back, hold off, stick back, hold off, just let it settle by itself. Flaps up and a quick shortcut across the grass, which I know is dry and solid. And we'll park it here, and I hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like more like this, please let me know. Please even feel free to suggest a particular airfield you'd like me to cover. And if you feel like subscribing, please do so and hit that notification button. Thanks very much. Cheers.